So today we will be going over hypothesis testing. We will be talking about the differences between a null hypothesis versus an alternate hypothesis, one-tailed test versus two-tailed test, what is type 1 error, how do we determine the test statistic and p-value, and how we determine the critical value and draw our conclusion. So to begin with, a null hypothesis is a typical statistical theory that suggests that no statistical relationship and significance exists in a set of given single observed variable between two sets of observed data and measured phenomena. The null hypothesis, denoted by HO, is usually the hypothesis that sample observations result purely from chance. An alternate hypothesis, it states that there is statistical significance between two variables. It is also denoted by H1 or HA. The hypothesis that sample observations are influenced by some non-random cause. Null hypothesis versus alternate hypothesis. So let's suppose we wanted to determine whether a cone was fair and balanced. A null hypothesis might be that half the flip would result in heads and half in tails. The alternate hypothesis might be that the number of heads and tails would be very different. Symbolically, these hypotheses would be expressed as HO, P equals 0.5, and HA, P would result in 0.5, greater than or less than. So suppose we flip the coin 50 times, resulting in 40 heads and 10 tails. Given this result, we would be inclined to reject the null hypothesis. That is, we would conclude that the coin was probably not fair and balanced. So, one-tailed test versus two-tailed test. One-tailed test is a statistical test in which the critical area of a distribution is one-sided, so that it is either greater than or less than a certain value, but not both. If the sample being tested falls into one-sided critical area, the alternative hypothesis will be accepted instead of the null hypothesis. A test that is conducted to show whether the mean of the sample is significantly greater than or significantly less than the mean of a population is considered a two-tailed test. What is type 1 error? So, type 1 error is a false positive. It is a rejection of the null hypothesis even though the hypothesis is proven to be true. Statisticians use the Greek letter alpha to indicate the probability of type 1 error. How do we determine the statistic and p-value? The test statistics can be calculated by using the given value to be tested and the observed value from the population against which it is to be tested. For instance, in checking the mean of sample whether to be equal to a certain value or not, we use sample mean, population mean, sample size, and the standard deviation, and the test statistic can be calculated as shown down below, which is right here. Then, based on the test, the p-value can be calculated by looking into the associated test table. The probability associated with calculated test statistic. How do we determine the critical value and draw a conclusion? The critical value is a factor used to compute the margin of error, such as margin of error equals critical value times standard deviation of the statistic, or the margin of error equaling to critical value times the standard deviation. The standard error of the statistics. So we use p-values to make conclusions in significance testing. More specifically, we compare the p-value to a significance level alpha, to make conclusions about our hypotheses. Thank you.